everybody. Yes, thank you. So we are recording these sessions. So like if anybody is absent, then we'll send it out to you. Or if it's a session you just want to hear again or whatever, just let me know. And then, we'll just resend the link if you want to listen to the session again. All right. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Ma'am.
All right. Very good. Very good. So we always like to kick off with the assignment that you had for last week, and that assignment was to, of course, with some reading, and we're going to get into that in a few. But I want to touch bases regarding the Gina Stewart video that we send out, and to get some feedback from you in reference to that video. Does anybody want to jump on that, on Gina Stewart, regarding your thoughts, your observations, especially of some of the persons who were in that room during when she was giving the preach word? I see you nodding your head gaily. Would you like to kick off that conversation?
That one guy that was on his phone most of the time. I mean, he made it more important for that telephone than what she was saying. And sometimes I was thinking, I was like, is she thinking about herself and being at the convention with, talking about misinformation and the propaganda and all of that? I was like, I wonder if she was talking about herself, not talking about herself directly, but like, y'all going to get the message.
Talking about her experience.
Yes.
Got it. Got it. Anybody else want to add into that?
Yeah, I noticed. I was watching some of their faces, and at one point they were with her, but then if she would go a certain lane, their whole demeanor would change and they would stiffen up. But I felt the message, she was addressing that throughout the whole message. That's how I felt that all of that was being addressed and included in her message. And when she says, stop using your spirituality as a smokescreen, if you this, you this, if you that, if you homophobic, if you this, if you're a racist, if whatever you are, just own your stuff. Stop hiding behind your spirituality or trying to use that to justify it. Now,
yeah,
it was a long sermon. And at one point when she said, but Jesus, one person spoke up for him, I'm like, ain't nobody from that crowd speak up, because she was just saying so much stuff. And then when she came back and say Pontius Pilate's wife, it just made it all hit home.
Yep.
Because just listening to the message, and when she threw that, you're imagining the crowd. And I'm like, who spoke up in that crowd? But then when she said that, it was like, yeah. Even in that, it was a powerful message though.
Very much so.
I was gonna say, for me, I had watched it before, but this time, like, I watched it like all the way to the end where she got emotional and she was really moved. So of course she was included in the message. Rarely does a pastor preach, I'm gonna just say, or preacher preach, and they're somewhere haven't had the experience of what they're talking about. But it was a message of encouragement and, wanting to be inclusive for all women. So definitely, but the end part really got me because you saw her almost like you wiped the sweat off your head and it was like, I actually did this. I had this opportunity. And for me, it's like, if y'all don't never welcome me back again, you're going to know that I've been here this time. And so girlfriend just laid it all out on the table, and then, okay, we'll handle this after this is done, whatever that's going to look like. But she put it down, and she was really advocating for truth for women. It was powerful.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the message. I actually had to watch it twice because the first time I was like, okay, wait a minute. I was watching and listening, but the second time I was actually watching, the word that she gave spoke not to just the situation as far as women in the church, but also to the state of the world. So I think the way that she put it all together and made it seamless and not over anybody's head, although I'm sure everybody there understood what she was, the point that she was trying to make. Now, what I got distracted by is when the Holy Spirit really was moving, and I felt like the men's demeanor changed. And the one guy who just kept getting closer and closer to a black suit, I don't know who he was, he showed no emotion. He didn't clap. He didn't say amen. He didn't say nothing. And I was like, is this a pull jacket moment? Is he trying to get her to sit down? But it was like, then I felt like other men were taking cues from his demeanor. Mm-hmm. So that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, I got out of it that I like when she said, if you do dirty work, come out of the closet. And I like, she said that Jesus was in trouble, and she said Jesus is in trouble because they couldn't control Jesus.
Right. Okay.
And the guy that we all talk about, mm-hmm. Well, at the end, he couldn't wait till the sermon was over because he was gone. And he didn't show no kind of emotion. He didn't raise his hand. He was on the phone all the time. I said, I wonder, is he there to see what she's doing so he could take it back to somebody else?
He was one of the it was the Baptist convention, and so the Baptist church got these different branches, for want of a better word. So he was president of one of them. So he held position. And wait a minute, I'm just on. Lisa just need her email. I'm sorry. One of my folks said one of our ladies didn't get the email. So anyway, there was pushback for her to be preaching there in the first place. She was the first woman to preach at that convention. Oh. And so when they panned the audience, in fact, Dr. McIntyre brought it out last week. If you notice, when they panned the audience, there were a lot of empty chairs there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there was pushback because she was a woman and she was preaching. So you're absolutely right about the tension that she was under to stand and to bring the word. And she definitely came from a womanist perspective. And like initially, I don't know, initially for me, when I was watching it, like I told you guys last week, is because I just saw a whole lot of chatter on social media about how petty that some of the ministers were at the convention because of Gina Stewart. And I was like, well, what about Gina Stewart? And when I went over there listening to the message, and I'm going all the way through, and she going, it wasn't until she got to the end when she was talking about, when she got all the way down to the end and she started talking about what you say about us behind closed doors. Mm. And the names that you called us. Mm. And if you owned us in public, I was like, okay. That's why they're mad. They're mad now.
Yeah, that was, I'm sorry. Go ahead, whoever, because I spoke.
When I was looking at the altar, the pulpit, the women was coming on there, and I said, are they the ones gonna have her back or what? And then like the men kind of like overrode them. But what part of the message did they take out?
They had deleted they had deleted the entire message.
Yeah.
Yeah, of all of they, of course, during the convention, they got a lot of sermons and so forth. Hers was the only one that accidentally was deleted.
Oh, okay.
But they put it back up, or she was doing the interview process. They said that they had put it back up, but they had taken off the ending.
Yeah, they put it back up. So like how I saw it was through YouTube. It wasn't they had taken it down off of their Facebook page, I think. And so how I saw it, someone else had reposted it, but they had reposted the entire sermon. But they were claiming that somehow or another they had some kind of glitch in the system, and it was the reason why her message was deleted. But she literally was literally walking into the lion's den, and she knew she was. So she had to be really prayed up, and on and geared up, because she knew what she was facing.
Mhm.
She just went on in. What are you saying, Ricky? All right, maybe he'll jump
No, I
on.
was saying that when they're talking about glitches in the system, I said I don't buy it.
Oh yeah. No, that glitch in the system thing.
I
When it
think
wasn't
Me
anybody.
either. I didn't buy that either. I was waiting for somebody to say that.
Yeah.
But I think Roland Martin said at the beginning of his interview, I think he said they got it from her church website or the church website. Because at the time when he was told about it, it wasn't on the convention site. And he said, it is crazy how out of all the videos that wasn't there, it was the one female preacher that wasn't there.
That one.
Yeah, that was intentional. They just don't want to say who did it.
Roland Martin is a whole thug. Listening to him, he was like, "Don't play with my wife, don't,
Yeah.
because I'm gonna come for you." But anyway, I think the irony for me is that you know how we often say what the enemy meant for bad, God meant it for good. Just like how you said you came upon it, Pastor K. It's like, okay, he didn't want it to get out, but because of all the pushback, now everybody is drawn to what she say, how, you know what I mean? So now even more people are watching or looking and listening and all of that. So it's working for a good.
I mean, it took you're absolutely right. It took off like wildfire because there were now she had sweatshirts and t-shirts going out saying I'm Claudia, and she was using the proceeds from the t-shirt for the missions group that she's the president of. She was the first female president of, I can't think, she mentioned it in the sermon. The mission group that it's a Baptist group that she is, and
It's
like,
Lot
and so
Carey.
huh?
Is it Lot Carey?
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
She's the president over there. So you raising the money for her. So now she's selling the t-shirts, putting it over there in Lot Carey. I'm working out. I mean, she blew up even more because of that.
Exactly.
You're absolutely right. I didn't know anything about the Baptist convention. I don't listen to the Baptist convention. I don't know what's happening over there. And they're like, until what? So you're absolutely right. What they tried to do to silence her, they really gave her voice and gave her even a greater voice. And that's how the Lord works. And you be trying to do do a little bit on the sneaky side and to catch up with you a little bit. So like I was at a conference back in March, and she was one of the speakers. And so of course, it was a women's group, ministers. So she walks in the room on the panel. Now you got a whole nother rack of women who knew her anyway, but now she, it's like, hey sis, you stood up for all of us. You said what so many of us want to say, so many have gone through. You got up there and you just laid it out there, knowing you were going to catch it from some of it. So you're right. The guy that Erling was pointing out about the guy sitting right next to her, and he was just right on her. Kind of reminded the time when Trump would just stand up on Hillary. He was doing that kind of stuff. To just back up a little bit. And then big guy sitting over on the left hand side. I know why he was moving, but he did not respond either. So they let their feelings show. But anyway, she gave a powerful message.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, I thought the one that was directly behind her, he looked like he was just stunned and he was so motionless. And then all of a sudden, I don't know where the lady, I think she had on green. I don't know how the women all of a sudden started pushing the men out of the way.
Yeah.
And they were looking at the men were looking at each other, like they were all stunned that they knew that she was, having no cut card.
Right.
I think they They knew she was talking about them.
Right.
I think they got the message. Minister Hope.
I liked her audacity. It reminded me of Vashti. If I perish, let me perish. You know what I mean? Like she just had that boldness about her. Like, I know what I'm going in here to do. I know what's up against me. It's going to be what it's going to be. And that's what I loved about her. The part when she said, instead of using biblical characters as models of how we should live, we should be using them as mirrors of how we actually do live. And she mentioned, we claim we don't want to be like Pilate, but yet we act like him. So I just like you guys said, I just love that she was bold enough to say everything that everybody wanted to say and didn't care about the repercussions. That's what I love about it.
She was dropping bombs all over the place.
Yeah, shots were fired.
I mean, and wasn't missing the target. She was,
Well,
but
my
yeah,
thing, I just don't understand what they were so upset about. She's Gina Stewart. You knew what she was gonna do. She's not like a stranger. It's like asking for Beyonce, and then you don't like what she did. You know what Gina Stewart's gonna do. She gonna push the envelope, and you know she gonna put you in your place. She always does. So I don't understand what they were upset about. You knew what she was gonna do.
they were upset because she was a woman.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's always going to be the case. But I'm just saying, what she does there, that's no different than what she does in her church,
Right, right.
or when she was at Hampton. She gonna put it out there, you know.
She was a woman, and another thing that she did, and I don't know if you guys picked it up, when she started going into tongues. All Baptists don't support that. And when y'all caught that? When she went there, she already knew she was gonna set them off even more. She did.
She said, I know I'm Baptist, but I believe in the Holy Ghost.
Yes, Tay. Yes, that part right there. I was like,
believe
come
in the
on,
Holy
sis.
Ghost too, because that shifts the atmosphere.
Yes.
Hey now.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
even in her prayer, when she was praying, she said, "Comfort the disturbed." I was like, "Uh oh."
Oh, but that's good. Yeah. So Miss Gina Stewart, she's on fire, and there are a lot of awesome preachers, and hopefully I can get some out to you to some. And that's the thing, it's so many powerful preachers, even those who are like the foremothers of preaching. And even as far as contemporary time, even in our area, the Annapolis area, you have, some of the women who were out on the forefront, some of the first to become. So we're going to talk about that a little later. But yeah, I'm glad you guys enjoyed Miss Dr. Gina Stewart. So she definitely delivered. So tonight, hold on here, where am I going here? So tonight I am making a slight change, if you will, in how we're going to do our lessons for the next few weeks. And so what I decided to do was, I know initially you guys got your assignment, and out on the syllabus it was saying tonight we're going to discuss both Hagar and the Levite's concubine. I decided to separate those two. And for tonight, we're just going to concentrate on Hagar. And then next week, we're going to just look at the Levite's concubine. And the reason I wanted to do that, because each of those ladies, their stories, they deserve their own space and their own time that we can dedicate to, because there's so much to pack into their stories. So if you've already read Hagar in preparation for tonight, and also the story about the Levite's concubine, you already know, especially the Levite's concubine. That right there is just it's just a lot there. So it's a lot to pack, and that we want to unpack in those stories. So I wanted to just break them up and talk about them separately. So with that said, I'm making the change because we were going to talk about the two Tamars, and I'm changing out the two Tamars And the reason I'm changing not the two Tamars is because the text that we're going to do tonight, and definitely for next week, these are texts that can be very triggering. And so that is the reason why I was removing the Tamar session, because I figured we got already one potential or two potential sessions that could be triggering. I didn't think it was necessary to add another one in. So I was making that change. The Hagar story, the Levite's concubine story, those stories are included in what is called, it was a phrase that is coined by this feminist theologian who, so she's a white sister named Phyllis Tribble. And she coined the phrase, the text, the TEXTS, the text of terror. That story about Hagar, the story about the Levite concubine, the stories about Tamar's rape by her half brother, the sacrifice that was made that Jeff's daughter had to make, are all very traumatic stories, if you will, about women. And she called those texts the texts of terror because of how traumatizing it can be and how gut-wrenching they could be. So that was the reason that I made those changes. Any thoughts in reference to that? And if you guys were okay with that change? Everybody good?
I'm fine
Everybody?
with it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So tonight we're going to focus in on Hagar. And I called tonight's study Hagar and the God Who Sees. The primary focus of womanist theology is to look for women in the Bible with the intent of what we call reclaiming their identity and their role by analyzing them through the lens of Black women's experiences. And so when we say reclaiming their identity, we mean that historically, she may have been overlooked, and her side of the story may not have necessarily come out in scripture, or she may have been, and when I'm saying she, I'm just talking about women in general, some of the stories in scripture, or she may have been misunderstood. For example, I feel that Job's wife has historically been misunderstood. I feel that often Job's wife is demonized because she told Job, after losing all of her kids, losing everything, watching her husband, suffering from this awful illness, and she just loses her mind, and she just absolutely says, why don't you just curse God and die? Now, I don't necessarily, that is a harsh statement that she made, but at the same time, if you now look at her as a mother who carried these children, birthed these children, nursed them when they were sick, you could understand why she would have just lost it and said what she said. So reclaiming their identity is now, let's look at this person from a different perspective. Let's look at this person through the lens of Black women's experiences. And so in our case, as we're going to be looking at these ladies, and we're saying we're looking at it through the lens of Black women, we're looking through the lens of Black women and our experience of living in America. Because as I said, womanist theology is not limited to Black women in the United States. It's for any woman of color, no matter what country she may be in and what religion she is, because if you are atheist, that's your theology. So we're looking at it through that lens. So again, reclaiming her identity and purpose is looking at a woman's story in the Bible and reevaluating, retelling her true identity and her purpose. And so we just discussed about Gina Stewart, where she went in and reclaimed um and reclaimed Polly's wife story. She goes in and she gives, because scripture doesn't tell us her name. How we find out her name is Claudia is Dr. Stewart just went and did some research and there are various historical records that identify her as Claudia. So the first thing that Dr. Stewart does as part of reclaiming this scripture from a womanist perspective is now she has now given this nameless woman her name. Mm-hmm. She's now giving her some value. So she is giving us who she is, and then she is highlighting Claudia's purpose and importance to the story. So she brings Claudia really to the forefront, and so as the one who stood up for Jesus. And so we don't necessarily look at her in that perspective. We just may see her, oh, she tried to warn him, she tried to tell him, but Dr. Stewart brings Claudia up to the front and place her square in the middle of the story and shares with us how important she is to this whole context, if you will. And so she's the one who stood up for Jesus. And then what she did was she then connects Claudia to today's Black women when she turned around and she said to the audience, now say her name. And so when she said that, you know, for us, our minds would then go back to the Breonna Taylors, and we will go over to the Sandra Bland, and we're thinking about those women who are nameless and whose names that we need to recall. So she then brings Claudia to us and say, okay, we need to say her name too, because we don't want to forget who she is. And so she parallels it to the Say Her Name movement with Claudia, you know, again, to bring attention to the often invisible names and stories of Black women and girls who have been victimized by racist police violence. That's what she does with that. Okay. So what she used was, and in womanist theology, is a method called hermeneutic of suspicion. I'm going to spell that out for you. It's H-E-R, and Eric, if you want putting it in the chat for me, it's HERMENEUTIC, hermeneutic of suspicion. Okay. Y'all got that? Mm-hmm. Load it in the text. And what it simply means is you're going to question the text. You're going to ask the text questions that's not readily there. You're going to question some of the meaning of the word and what is the intent of the author. So for example, we want to ask the question, well, why did Matthew omit Claudia's name? Why he didn't give her name? You know, was it because, you know, he considered her to be insignificant, or what she had to say wasn't that important, or, you know, why? We don't know why. You know, why did she send this dire message, this message that kept her out all night, that she wrestled with? Why did she send the message to her husband instead of going to her husband herself? So those are the kind of questions when we're talking about looking at questioning the text, is what we do when we're looking at passages of that. You know, questioning the text was I questioned the text about Bathsheba. You know, she was labeled to be an adulteress, but how can you be an adulteress when you were raped? You know, the text talk about David's remorse. It talks about David's regret, but it doesn't mention anything about how did Bathsheba feel. So for tonight session, and again on next week when we look at the concubines, the Levite's concubine, we want to use this hermeneutic of suspicion. We want to question the text to unpack the stories of Hagar for tonight. Okay. And we want to look at the text with some suspicion. We want to look to see if there are any hidden or repressed meanings. What else is there? We want to look at, well, why is it that Black women can relate to Hagar? So what we're going to do is, again, break you out into your breakout rooms. And I'd like for you to reread the text and use the approach that I just gave you, the hermeneutic of suspicion, to question Genesis 16 and to look for meaning that is not readily available. All right. Any questions?
Did you say how much time?
We're going to start with about 15 minutes, and then I'll just jump into the rooms. We're going to look around, and then when we come back, we're going to walk through the scripture together, and we just want to see. We want to see Hagar's story. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Okay. Eric, you see your breakout coming up.
This would have went along all week for real.
Well, it could.
Yes.
We got into a whole lot of other biblical stuff. So yeah.
Yes. Woo, Chad.
All right. So
the Bible.
That's right. Loaded.
Life.
Go ahead and just put it out there.
Yep.
All right. So you've utilized your hermeneutic suspicion in this case.
Yes.
And so now let's get into this to this word, and we want to look at let's look at verses 1. How far down I want to go? Let's look at verses 1 through 4.
Okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her."
Mm-hmm.
Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave, Hagar, gave her to her husband to be his wife. She was a concubine. And he slept with Hagar, and she conceived. Okay. What y'all got to say?
I got a question.
Okay. Oh, here we go.
Because I read it in a couple different translations.
Okay.
But for me, I looked at it first as she was a slave, because to me, initially, she wasn't one of his concubines. So I saw her from a servant's perspective. And then not as a concubine, because my understanding of the concubines was they slept with the wives and the concubines. The concubines was basically just other parts of the wife, to me, in my interpretation, gospel according to Shante. So he would have went to a concubine if she really had one. So that was my thing. And then one of my questions for that part was, what did he say when, how did she feel? This was a question we talked about in our group. And what did he say before he had relations with her?
Okay.
Well, let's jump in on let's zero in. How do you think she felt? How did she feel when
Which she?
Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband, to be. So how do you think Hagar felt?
That was a question we
Hagar
had
didn't have
also.
a choice.
Wait a minute. I think it was Veronica. And if you guys don't mind, kind of give your name so I can find you.
Okay, Veronica.
Okay.
We had that same question, and we felt, was it their culture back then to just oppress their concubines or their servants back then?
Okay. Arlene?
Yes, that
Add
was
to
some
it.
of the conversation we had about the morals and the cultural customs and even the religion, because Sarah kind of made it seem like, well, God stopped me from having children, so then this must be the intent for me to have children through her. So it's almost like that was her justification for having that idea. But Hagar didn't have any say over it no matter what. She had to be subservient because she was in a position of the servant. She was a slave, and then she was made to be a wife without any control, no say of it.
So how do you
That
how do you think she felt?
degraded.
Degraded, like she
Abused,
was
Degraded. Just like
misused.
not like
misuse, misuse a piece of meat,
Yep.
abuse,
Misused?
abuse.
Afraid.
She
What else?
she may have been honored initially for because she was able to do something that the wife couldn't do, and during that culture, that time in culture, it was having children and carrying on the lineage was very high. So maybe initially she felt honored, and then as she was mistreated, maybe then her self-image changed.
yes.
I never looked
Especially
at
with
it that
having,
way.
especially
never
with
looked
giving
Yeah.
birth to a boy.
I never looked at it that way.
That's a different perspective that she
Yeah,
Yes.
could have felt honored.
I had a different perspective. It's Kiana.
Okay.
I was thinking along the lines of Miss Denise that because she was Egyptian living outside of her culture, that's how they secured like their lineage. So she may have accepted this as a way to basically secure her future.
Okay.
So this is
yeah.
this is Daphne. Oh, sorry, Kim. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave, because we so excited, child. We all trying to talk at the same time. Let's get it.
Well, we took it a little different in that we also zoned in on Sarah's statement that perhaps she can start a family through this one, which means when we read it, Hagar would be one of many, but the previous ones never produced an heir. So not only am I being forced, but I'm one of how many? The fact that the scripture pointed out that they've been in Canaan for 10 years,
Yeah.
it's very unlikely that Hagar is the first one.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we
But
took it that Hagar would be just one in, one in a line that potentially could have bore, which also gave her a little bragging rights when she's the first one to conceive.
Okay. That's that's
okay.
another.
And the other thing,
Wait a minute.
the other thing, Brenda, this is the other thing I was thinking about. She bore the child for her, but it wouldn't even been considered her child. It would have been considered Sarah's child.
Right.
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 Yeah.
And is it possible that Abram and Sarah were able to hold on to their faith, but after a period of time, it started giving way? Meaning, didn't try to have a child through a surrogate. I'm going to hold on and believe because God has made this promise, and they held on for 10 years. Stuff was getting, was changed. Body was changing up, and they begin to question. Okay, so any other? So we're hearing that she could have felt honored, and we're all talking about that particular culture during that particular time, that she could have felt that way. But we're also saying that she probably felt, degrade. She didn't have a choice, which she did.
She did.
She didn't have a choice. She had to. She was a possession of Sarah, and we also want to look at it too that slavery then, it wasn't like American slavery. So you know, it wasn't like more than likely it wasn't a thing where, you know, they went down to Egypt and they could have bought her for a price, because you know that's what happened to Joseph. But they're
over 8:30.
But they're sometimes they're bought. They go into servitude because they got bills to pay. You know what I mean? It's a way of providing or whatever. So they will give themselves as a slave. So the question we want to ask is, how did she become a slave? We know she is one. So that's one question you can look at. Did she become a slave? Did she become a slave out of necessity? Did she become a slave because she needed a way to keep food on the table and a roof over her head? Did she become a slave because her father owed a debt for her to pay it off? And after a period of time, she would be free. We don't know that, but that is questioning the text. Is we don't know what the whole deal was. All we know is she is a slave. How did she become one? And that's where you can use some liberty in you know, especially for those of you who are Bible study teachers and you know, your pastors and ministers here, is that you can get into that part. It's like, well, how would it feel if she had to give up herself? And how would I can relate to that as a woman, where I may have to do something in order to secure myself? How many Black women had to take on a job that they really didn't like, but it's the only thing they could to keep a roof over their head? They needed this extra job to feed the kids. And so they might have taken something that they didn't want to do, but they had to do it, you know, until they didn't really, they had, their choices were limited. So I'm not saying this is what happened with Hagar. I'm saying if we're looking at the text and we're going to question it, that's how some of the line of questioning could go. Because we're now taking our experiences and looking through the lens of our experience as to what could be going on with Hagar here. Not saying that it is, but what could be happening. Okay. Any questions? Any more comments on what's happening there? So she. Okay.
Oh, I just was gonna ask a quick question as you know we talking. How they end up with an Egyptian slave?
Well, they were down in Egypt, remember?
So did she leave with them? You know, when
that's the part of questioning the text.
Wow.
Did she leave with them? Did she say, okay, I was gonna be your slave for X number of years to pay off a debt? Did her daddy say, hey, I need you to go with them? We don't know, but we know she left with them, and she probably, and that's where, because they were in Egypt before. Okay. You look like you're still struggling with that, Shantae.
No, I just was saying it's crazy how the tables turn, because you know they were the slaves of Egypt and now they have an Egyptian slave. That's all I was saying. Just talking to myself.
Oh, I'm following you now. I got you now.
Yeah, that's why I was like, how they end up? It's like the tables turn. But yeah, okay. I'm back.
Well, they hadn't become slaves. You're talking about the
right. They become the slaves to the
because remember,
they hadn't at that time. Okay.
No, remember Abram, God has made
It's
this
before that
covenant, right? They don't have the tribes, they haven't gone into it yet. Okay, I follow you. All right, he slept with Hagar and she conceived. I thought somebody brought up, well, how did she feel about sleeping with him? He was already old. We can leave that right there.
But he got money.
What'd you say, Ricky?
I said, but he's got money.
But old in the Bible isn't like old is now.
Exactly. He was handsome. He was handsome. He was fine past the game.
Money would make everybody look better.
Yeah.
What you say?
Money makes everybody look a little bit better.
That is a lie. That is a lie right there.
I said a little bit. I said a little bit better.
Because listen, Flavor Flav, I wouldn't care how much money he got. You can blindfold me. But
It make you
Flavor
close your
Flav,
eyes.
oh my goodness. He never looked that good.
Oh, Lord.
I was gonna say
I digress. I'm sorry.
You went to a whole nother
the
level.
money
Kim.
will make you look good or something like that. I was gonna
You
say to Timmy's point though, when the Bible calls out old, that's extra old.
Well,
Them men were living till they were
Bible didn't
900
say he
years
was.
old. So
The Bible didn't say he was
fine.
in, I'm sorry. The Bible didn't say he was in good shape like Moses was. The Bible didn't mention it. So, because
but
when you look over it further, which was several years later, we will have to say that. But he was
That's funny.
when she finally conceived.
no, all his faculties were still working.
Evidently, he wasn't on Viagra.
Yeah.
All right, I think
I'm
it's time
just
for us to
saying.
move on. I think it's time for us to
Ain't it time to talk about Ruth?
All right.
Always had the women was always younger in those days.
Okay, ladies, let's bring it in. Oh, Lord. Okay. Can we get back to the text? Because y'all using your hermeneutic suspicion to a whole nother level, okay? So I just want to say that. All right. Okay, so we're going into verse 4. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. And then Sarah said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Your slave is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. And then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. She gets pregnant, she despised. What's up with that? What y'all say? What's your suspicion? What are you questioning the text as to why is she despising Sarah?
That's where I have the suspicion.
Okay.
Right.
Because sorry for your namesake, but this is when the this is when the Karen version of Sarah comes out. Because you put her in her hand, and Abram said, you the one to say, hey, take her. And now you're saying that, now she's, acting out of place. I don't necessarily think that she was doing that. I think more so that Sarah was offended by it.
Okay. And
so I think she's projecting.
Okay. And why would she be projecting?
Jealousy.
I already said because she was giving her something that she couldn't have.
Yeah.
She couldn't do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, Michelle said what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Same
because she
for everybody
conceived.
else. Yeah, yeah.
Because she was able to conceive.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it was a boy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, at
that
this
old
point,
man could have been looking
at this point,
they don't know. I already said they don't know at this
She
point.
don't know yet.
No, I'm saying even after she has the baby, it's a boy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right.
So that makes matters even worse, right?
Worse.
Because the firstborn son.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So why do you think Hagar despised Sarah?
Because she probably was giving Sarah a lot of attitude. But hey, you the one set me up to do this.
That's
Okay.
And then that I'm doing it, you got nerve to be mad with me.
That part.
You know, so she gonna give it back to her.
Okay. All right. And is it possible too that she was disturbed with Sarah because technically the child would be Sarah's?
Yes. We did discuss
Now,
that.
I'm carrying this child, and now
Yeah.
you're gonna raise it. So how from a Black woman's perspective, especially historically, why would that be an issue with us, or could be an issue with us?
Because
going back in history.
Because Black women had the children of their masters at times. And now we got people in the house and everything else.
There we go. And so that's another approach looking at it. Why is she despising her mistress? And we can relate it to that is because as Black women looking through that lens, a Black woman knows from, going through slavery, know what it's like to be impregnated by their slave master, having absolutely no choice about the matter, and having to give birth to that child, and then still love the slave master's child. After he has forced herself on him, on her, and then not only forcing himself on her, but he is only looking at it, one way he's looking at it is like the Black woman really was the one who provided the labor. Her body was used to provide the labor force for slavery to continue. Because you got to maintain the economy.
And
So
clean his house.
And clean his house. Exactly.
And nurse their child.
And nurse the child. Yes. Shande, I see your hands up.
Okay, it's for me, Brittany. I I'm listening to everything, and I think my hermeneutic suspicion, I guess, to keeping it with the theme here, what did they think was going to happen if she sent her in there to have a baby? And so it's kind of like I was saying to her, like, you plant an apple tree, you gonna get some apples. Yeah. So a lot of times when we feel like, all right, God said this finna happen and it doesn't, we say, all right, well, I'm gonna make it happen. And then you make something happen. That's you got to deal with the consequences of your actions, right? And if you had to just waited on what the Lord was going to say or what he was going to do, what he promised to do, you would have the children, even if they didn't come from you because you were barren. They were going to come through you in some way. So by going outside of the will, now you're getting what you intended to get, but it's not in the package that you were hoping for. And now you've involved two other people in a plan to go outside the purpose of Christ. And you cannot control how other people respond to things that they experience.
Yeah.
And now you mad. I'm just saying that from Sarah's perspective. I know Hagar went through some stuff too. I get that. Right. Just from Sarah's perspective, you can't get mad when you try to go before the hand of God, and it actually produces something that you just weren't expecting to feel the way that you felt about it. Even though you could take the child for your own, something is awry, and that is genuinely because you went outside of the plan that God had for you.
And so, in other words, we sometimes create our own Ishmael.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Oh, go ahead, Daphne.
We talked about that in our group too, Brittany. More from the Sarah perspective is it's one thing for me to offer up my slave. It's another thing for me to see it walking around on two legs. So, Sarah's pissed off, not just, you have a constant reminder now of going outside of God's will. You have a constant reminder of your husband pretty much sleeping with another woman that you gave him permission to do. I mean, even though he did, we discussed also that Abram pulled a Adam. Abram pulled an Adam and said, I ain't dealing with this, you deal with this.
Yes.
This the slave you gave me.
Right.
Sure did.
In our group, we said that, and we said, when you look at it from today's perspective, that's a lot of times as we as women try to take matters into our own hands. And because we're anxious or we get impatient or we don't want to wait for that to take, we step in and try to formulate it. And then when it comes back, we don't like it. And we also had that same question about Abram, that a lot of men will just be silent, because we were saying he didn't even go to Hagar. He ain't try to check Sarah. I mean, he kind of tried to check Sarah, but he didn't. He kind of just left it. Like, you handle it, you deal with it, and kind of stepped aside. So we said, what Daphne and them said too, he played that Adam role, like, this was your choice and this was your decision, and then she probably, however, we don't even know how Abram was treating her, You know, she probably was like, you wanted to go in there with her anyway a long time ago. You know what I mean? So all of that is going
Yeah.
on.
Can I say something, Pastor? We was talking about, I had mentioned that, Hagar, I mean, not Hagar, Sarah, I feel like Sarah was watching Hagar for a minute and she chose her for that purpose. And then once Hagar became pregnant, Hagar was like, well, look, I'm flaunting this and, I got what you want and so on and so forth. And Sarah became very angry. That's why she ended up treating her the way that she treated her. But then, Sarah's like, well, Abraham, you need to do this and you need to do that. And Abraham is like, well, life is life and this is what you want. So you deal with it at the end of the day. But it's like paternity court. It's like paternity court, like when you have the husband and the husband has stepped out and the wife is there, and then you have the mistress with the baby and stuff like that. I mean, that's what we was some of the stuff we was talking about, but I feel like it's like paternity court in this situation.
It was a lot there, and well, we got brothers on here, so y'all can speak. But men are wired differently from us. And so for Abraham, he may have absolutely no emotional attachment to her whatsoever.
Yep. Agreed.
But doesn't mean that Hagar might didn't have any emotional, or she may have.
Well, that was my thought too, because when he said, "Oh, that's your maid. Do what you want with her," it's like there's no emotional attachment. Something you asked me to do, then you do what you want to do with her.
Yeah, he tossed it right on out.
Pastor K, I think she loved Abraham so much, Sarah. This is maybe a totally different perspective than what I've been hearing. I think that Sarah loved him so much, because what woman, any of us, would give their husband, their man, to another woman? I think she loved him from another place. So much that she was willing to, to give him to her. But then feelings came in place with Hagar and Abraham, because you cannot presume that position and don't feel anything. The way that it happened. It wasn't like a wild sex, it wasn't like a wild rape, and things that we hear of today and things like that. They were together. And I think that it's a very special thing that she did, but then it went wrong, of course, because the feelings overrided everything.
And that is one way to look at it. We could look at it from that perspective, to say that it wasn't rape, but we don't know if it wasn't rape.
Yeah, well, it was a type of a rape, of course. Yeah.
How he did her. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So we move along here. And so he puts it in her hands. And so we're coming down to verse 6.
Okay.
Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. So just to give you this little piece before you guys get into it. So some Black theologians, male, and this is talking about before the wominists got into it, they criticized Hagar for running away because they were saying she was putting herself and her unborn child in jeopardy. But the question we want to ask the text is, we know she ran away because she was mistreated. Why do you think she would be desperate enough to run away in the condition that she was in? And if we go down to verse 7, it says, the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert, and it was a spring that is beside the road to Shur. So I looked up to see what the road to Shur, and the road to Shur is the passage from Canaan to Egypt. So she was trying to go back home. She was trying to head back to home. So let's talk about what did you guys get into that part? What, why would she make that as badly as she was being mistreated? Why do you think she would make that decision to try to run away in the condition that she was in?
To me, I think this Dominique, I think she was just trying to protect her child.
Okay.
And go back home where she thought it was safe.
Okay. That's good.
Protect her child, protect her sanity, because of all the emotional turmoil that she would have to, endure and continue enduring. So that's a thought.
Or maybe even having those feelings like, I'm loving this unborn child, so if I do run away, maybe I can keep this child and don't have to give him up.
Okay.
That could be a thought in her mind.
I would agree with everything that was said. Because we would have to just assume what kinds of abuse and things that she was suffering at that point. So she might have gotten to the point where I did what I was told and now I'm being punished. So she was just trying to get away from what was happening to her. So and that was in her mind, I would assume, because we don't know, she's protecting herself and her child. And we always hope we can go home regardless of the situation we're leaving to get there.
Yeah.
And maybe once you get when you go home, you'll be more protected. You won't be around the abuse or being talked about. You go home to people that love you and you know they love you and that you love.
Right.
Well, the question is, if she put herself there, well, why she didn't run away before she had the child?
Good question.
That's a good question.
That's a good question to ask the text.
We asked, well, the answer to your question about that, we felt like Abraham failed to protect her. And maybe she thought because she was carrying his child and this was his first child, that he would have protected her against Sarai, and she didn't.
Okay. Now let's take it and look through and let's take it and look through the lens of a woman. Okay.
So we looked at it through the lens of Hagar, the woman, and said that there are often times that others put us in predicaments. Hagar did not put herself in this predicament, but as a woman, we're going to find a way out. We may not know where we're going. We may not know the full details of how we're getting where we're going, but she was going to figure it out, even if it meant leaving the comfort and the familiar.
Right. Because sometimes as women, I would choose to have my peace than to live in misery. I would choose to live out of my car than to be in a house where I'm being abused. Sometimes women will make a decision, Black women will make a decision, and I'm not just Black, but that's who we're talking about here, to say, you know what? To preserve my peace, I will leave out this situation even because I don't even have a dime in my pocket. I would take my chances. I would go to a homeless shelter before I stay up in this camp. And so another way I'm looking at Hagar is in the decision she made, I will take my chance on trying to get back to Egypt than to stay up in this. Because sometimes that's what we will do. We will choose, I will leave this before you set me crazy. I will walk away, don't know how I'm going to make ends meet. I don't know what the future is going to hold, but what I do know is I'm not going to stay up in this, and I'm getting ready to roll on out and pray that the Lord be with us. And as we go down, as we see, the Lord was with her, right? She made a decision and the Lord was with her. And we have what it says, the angel of the Lord. So we have a theophany, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, where this is believed to be a pre-incarnate of Jesus speaking to her. So this makes Hagar, other than Eve, where God was speaking to both Adam and Eve, she was about the first woman that had a direct conversation with the Lord. So she's already moving up. And so she's made this statement. And so she tells him that I'm running away from my mistress. So why do you think The angel of the Lord told her to go back. He said, go back to your mistress and submit to her. Before we get to the ad, he told, go back and submit to her.
So Pastor K, this is the last verse that we got to as a group.
Okay.
And we didn't even, we didn't get to why the Lord asked. We got to the other thing that women do, especially in our relationship with God, is, Lord, is this me or is this you? Because you.
Oh, okay. Got you.
We went to Hagar. I mean, I know what the scripture says, and it comes with the next verse, and that's all nice with Eve and all the order and stuff. But our initial response as a woman is, that can't be you. There's no way you want me to go back to the very abuse that I ran away from. So is this me or is this you? So we talked about the back and forth, even in our belief.
That's good.
That we can go back and forth in our head, that is this truly God?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other input? Brittany, I see your finger moving. I don't know if you're trying to turn your mic on or not. I'm assuming you are. Your finger all over the place, girl.
Okay.
You got
I
it.
looked at it as although she was impregnated with this child, that child was still Abraham's seed.
Okay. So
She
you
was
think
still
that's why?
Abraham's seed, yeah.
Okay. Any other response?
This is Brittany. In our group, we talked about, I believe it was purposeful because I say wrap the thing back around, get back to the purpose that he had intended. And God, I don't believe God wastes anything, even when we do act on our own free will. And so if in fact he had promised Abraham, as Ms. Brenda said, many seeds, this is one of those seeds that have to be grafted into the purpose. And I believe that God used it to continue his ultimate plan, even though there was some deviation, and couple that with acknowledging Hagar and saying, I see your affliction, right? And in a way to kind of comfort and say, go back, it'll be dealt with, it'll be handled, right? And sometimes, sometimes God's will for us is not comfortable. You know what I mean? I don't believe that God is evil and seeks to, harm us. I mean, it actually says the complete opposite in the word. It's not his intention for us to be in those places where he is like, this is I'm doing this against you. But there are things that happen according to his plan that puts us in positions sometimes that may be uncomfortable, but are ultimately for our good. And going back to what I said previously, this is the consequences of someone else's actions that she just happened to be, collateral damage. And I think how great of a God that without just saying go back, but also saying I see you and I understand where you are, and not just sending a person back to the negative space without reason.
Right. Because he then blesses her. He now gives her a promise, where, he says, you're now pregnant, you will give birth to a son, you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery, and he will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all of his brothers. But at the same time, she is going to become a matriarch of a nation. And so coupled along with what you're saying, of having to go back and deal with it, it also could be God was protecting her. And that is, sis, if you keep on this road, you're going to run into some trouble. I need you to go back, deal with this later. I know it's going to be rough, but you keep going down this path where you're going to run into some trouble. So I'm trying to protect you. So sometimes God will send us back into something that we don't want to be a part of, but there's something worse, and he can send you back. So yeah, on both sides, she had to go back, because as you know, right later on in scripture, she ends up, and God says to Abraham to tell her to go anyway, and she begins to leave. Now the part that I found is interesting, and this is not with Hagar, but kind of looking at Ishmael, God is promising her that, she's going to have this son and what he was going to do through this son. But he's also telling her that this kid going to be off the hook.
Yeah, we thought that she must have great faith, because if you described to us, this child that has been, described to her, I don't know how I'd feel.
he was going to be off the hook. And so again, I'm questioning the text as to what's up with this kid. And so when you sit to look at it, Ishmael was 13 years old. He lived with his father for 13 years. He was the only child. And now your father sends you away, rejects you. Isn't that enough to make him crazy?
Pastor K.
Yeah.
I was looking at it too, is when he sent her back, he also told her how to act. Go back and to submit. Don't go back like you came, like you left out. Go back, chill. And, because again, you're going to need to probably chill because your son going to be, a little wild. But don't go back and act the way you were acting because, your son is going to be probably that same way. But she had to go back correct. You don't go back and stir up stuff,
Yeah.
But
go back
But she could be compared to the woman at the well.
Oh, explain that.
Well, because she says to him, "You are the God who sees me." And I felt that the woman at the well felt that God saw her as well.
Yes.
And that there was that connection.
That's true. That's true.
Kimmy, you want to share? Kimmy had a point about that too in our conversation. Kimmy?
You can go ahead.
No, I want you to tell it.
No, I was just saying that the connection between Hagar and the woman at the well, God met Hagar, it says in the wilderness, but at a spring of water. Jesus meets the woman at the well in the same thing. So, in the woman at the wells scenario, she went out to draw water when water was actually drawing her, meaning Christ being living water. And I just found the connection, so in both scenarios, God, Jesus reveals himself to both of these women who want to be seen as live at the water as living water.
Yeah, that's good. That was a good analogy. All right, any other input on that?
Well, I didn't go that route, but in our group, we talked about when you went to how God blessed her and said he was going to be a nation. But then we asked the question, why did he have to bury the sins of the people that created him? And we use that as in when a spouse steps out on a wife and creates another child, or when men create multiple babies, different mothers, and that one child gets isolated. Because he said you was going to have hostility between your siblings and stuff like that. It's like the child is carrying the sins of the parents when they did not ask to be here, when they weren't part of that situation. And now you have all of this trauma or all of these experiences you're going to go through because of a situation you was created in that you had no control over.
That's a good point.
And that's the same way a lot of times with children today, when you're that extra child or you're over here, it becomes a thing with the mothers, it becomes a thing with the father and the child. And it's just crazy.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So we come down to 13. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For he said, I have now seen the one who sees me. What does that say? What do you feel Hagar was feeling? How did she feel about this?
well, overlooked, ostracized. When you have, speaking from my own experience, but I didn't feel like God always saw me or that God always accepted me until I had to learn to receive the unconditional love of God. So, for God to use those words like I see you, to me, can only enhance her relationship with God. You're no longer overlooked. I see your pain. I see the rejection. I see how you were, I guess used, or you didn't have a voice or whatever. So, for somebody to say, I see you, it just, I don't know, it's something beautiful in that language. I don't know really how to articulate it, but yeah.
And I would add that it's like a level of acceptance. She was the slave, not the, not the master, but God still saw her. It's a whole different level of acceptance.
And that word, I like that.
Validation. Yeah.
Validation. Yeah,
Validation.
that's what I was thinking, being validated.
I'm going through hell over here.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally God comes up and he said, but I see you, sis.
Yeah, and I thought about how often do we want God to see us when we're going through in our brokenness and all of that. And that's where she was. She was at a pivotal point in her life. And then for the angel to come and say, I see you, or God to say, I see you, I thought that was great. To me, it resonated like how many times in my own personal life have I wanted God to see me when I felt like I was by myself or didn't know how I was going to get through this. And I think that's why she was there by the spring water, because it was I think that's where it was going to be a newness or a renewal for her with the redemptive God that we serve.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for today, right, just for example, if we talk about African American women, we see the Louis Vuitton bag, we see whatever shoes, Calvin Klein or Michael Kors or whatever, but do we see the heart of one another? Do we see the vulnerability or whatever pain it might be? So it's a seeing in a different way, validation in a different way beyond your money, your car, your house, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just want to see that. And clearly, how it's expressed here that she was God saw her, saw her in the midst of all of her pain and everything that she was going through. So yeah, any others as we come to a close, as we have got in and asked our questions of the text.
I would
want to say something, Pastor K. I'm sorry. Who did I? Sister Erling, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that it had to be a beautiful reassurance. And you could walk away from that spring and she could go back to that place. And regardless of the hell that might be going on around her, she had to have the peace of God within her at that point, because he gave her a promise. He came to see about her and he saw her. Like, he saw her. He knew all about her pain, and he took the time to come and see about her, because you're just as important as the person that thinks they are your master.
Right.
So that had to be a certain feeling of reassurance for her, to know that, yes, I'm going back in this situation, but I'm going with my head held high, my back a little straighter, and my heart filled just a little bit more, because I know God got me. And that's how, as women in general, we walk through situations when we've been through something, and God shows us you're not alone. You're not by yourself. I got you, sis. Hold on. The situation not over, but we can stand up a little taller and straighter and still get through the situation, because God got us. And we know that without a shadow of a doubt.
Right. That we're going to come out and we're going to make it. And he made that promise. That's the good point. That gave her the strength to deal with all that she was going through. Was all we need sometimes is a good promise from the Lord.
I also think that it gave her a new identity, from her past. And by telling her to go back, he had empowered her to be able to go back and be submissive and endure because there was a blessing in the horizon.
Yeah.
So
Because she does become Abraham is a patriarch,
yeah,
of a nation, and she becomes a matriarch. You got it, Pastor Key.
Basically, they summed it all up. Here's a little slave girl, was put in a position to be with Abraham. She gets pregnant. She gets ridiculed, and just you in a village. So, and Sarai is the woman. She the woman. So whatever Sarai says goes. Is they notice in Sarai treating her like that, the people in the village was. She was tormented. But then she leaves, go by this water, and God talks to me. When where I come from, they tell me, God, you don't matter to God. God ain't worried about you. But God stops and have a conversation with me and tells me he sees me. That's hope.
Yeah.
That girl got so much hope in her. I can see her marching back in that village right there. Yeah. She marched back with her head held high. Yeah. God talked to her, a little slave girl who's impregnated with a baby that's deep there. Yeah, I just imagine her walk back in that village. She was full of hope and faith and love for her God.
Yeah, that's good. That is, it's really good. So all your input, your suspicions were very good. I enjoyed all of the input as we looked at this lady. This story of Hagar, normally when you're going through any womanist reading or so forth, Hagar is usually presented, or she represents the oppressed woman. She is represent the woman who was oppressed, but at the same time, she had the courage enough to go and seek her freedom. And so that's how, when you look at literature and scholarly work, if you will, from womanist theology, that's how she is often presented, and how she holds space in the womanist theology, that she is the oppressed woman, but she had courage enough to go and seek her own freedom, if you will, and how she was able to sustain. And so a lot of people, as a womanist, they focus on her experience of the women of color, and they recognize that how desperate that Hagar was, that she felt it was necessary to liberate herself from her abuser. And so that basically, as you have shared here tonight, kind of wraps all of that up um, as to putting Hagar in her place, as to reclaiming Hagar's story and looking at Hagar through the lens of a Black woman, and giving her value and worth, as opposed to she was just a slave girl who had a kid. So, all right, any questions? All right, I'm going to ask a volunteer for prayer. Can I ask you, Minister Hope, if you wouldn't mind praying us out tonight?